What's going on, everyone? Steven here from Techmaker.tv. In this episode, we're going to try to wrap up our checklist over here in our note-taking application. This is part 4. In the last part, we actually started setting up, well, actually last time we just worked on the design here a little bit because it was looking kind of bad. In this episode, the last couple of things I want to do for the moment, we'll probably come back and touch on this in a work session later. But the last thing I want to do is add a drop down, which is going to look familiar if you're following along with some of our other series that we're doing right now, where we can actually change the status of these things. And then in addition to that, I'm going to add a progress bar. Probably right here in the middle or somewhere. I haven't fully decided yet, but we're going to add a progress bar that shows us exactly how far we are in our checklist in terms of completing it. We are going to use Stimulus Reflex, which is a new tool that I've become a huge fan of for actually completing the checklist items over here. And so I'm going to go ahead and jump over into my terminal and get that set up. So if we come over here and we run bundle add stimulus reflex, that will go ahead and add that to our gem file, and it looks like that finished. And then we can actually say bundle, actually let's run this, let's say Rails stimulus reflex install. Once that finishes, you should have a handful of new files, and I'm not going to go through all of it here because I've already covered that, so I'll link down in the description to another episode for covering Stimulus Reflex a little bit more in depth, but for now we're just going to kind of go ahead and move along. I'm going to go ahead and run one more command while we're here, and it's Rails G, which is short for generate if you're new to Rails, and then we'll say Stimulus Reflex, and I want to call the reflex checklist item, I think. Let's see what this does. So let's go check that out. Actually, before we go anywhere, let's restart the server over here. Make sure we're all good to go with that. And let's go back to our browser here and just refresh, and it's probably going to ask me to sign in. So we have a little security issue there, which we need to sort out. We need to have in our before action that you need to be signed in. Before I forget, let's go actually fix that just really fast. So let's see. In our home controller, are we actually even doing this anywhere right now? So in the notebooks controller, we have authenticate user. In the pages controller, it doesn't look like we're doing that. So let me go back over here and refresh this and see if that resolves that issue. So that's what I was expecting to see. So we'll need to double check all of that later, but for now I'm going to leave that. I think that's basically all of the front end views there. And we'll go ahead and sign in. Okay, so you know what, actually before we keep going, let me just double check this really fast. So our paragraphs controller, we want to authenticate user, image elements, let's see here, checklist. We're just making sure somebody's signed in. It actually wouldn't let you create or update anything because it's all scoped to the current user. But we might as well go ahead and make sure somebody's logged in before they can pull data from here or whatever. So that makes sense, and I think that's all good to go. Okay, so I'm going to close all of this, and let's take a look at what we're actually wanting to accomplish here. So let's go to our pages show. Maybe I should spell that right. So pages show. And let's look at where we are exactly. So we're down here in this checklist. We definitely need to clean up these views at some point. Where is the delete? So right here we have this checklist items.each, if persisted. We have the title here. And then we have this link to this long path name method delete, and then we basically have a time symbol. So that's where we get the little close icon. So I've got this in this justify content between, And what I want to do is actually add a drop down, which is going to be just to the left of the X here. And I'm going to actually paste in some code from the simple project management app that we've been building, also over on our website, so feel free to check that out. I will explain it, and we're going to have to modify it a fair amount, but I'm going to go ahead and paste in kind of a boilerplate. And what I want to do is create a div and go ahead and bump that into it. And the reason is the deflex up there. We want to create a little grouping here. And I'm just going to paste in this kind of big chunk of code related to the drop down that we want. And so we have some kind of problematic code in here because we're trying to talk to a task which doesn't exist in this app. We have this task status options.each, so on and so forth. And I think I'm going to do the very same thing in this app as the other one in terms of statuses. So I'm actually going to go ahead and copy a couple more things and paste them. We'll see where we end up. So let's open up our checklist item. If I can spell that right again. And I'm going to go ahead and just paste in some stuff, and we're going to fix it all in just a second, so don't worry, and we will explain it all. And also, let's go over to our schema and just remind ourselves what is on the checklist item. So we have this string of status, and I've named everything the same. I guess I have habits that are pretty consistent. So I want to keep this not started, in progress, and complete. The status options here make sense. And again, we worked this out in another series in depth, so I will refer you over there for a more in-depth explanation, but I think this is all pretty straightforward. Then let's go back over here, and let's say this needs to be, let's start at the top here, checklist item. So everywhere where we have task, we're going to replace it with checklist item. And then here we'll say checklist item. And we have this status reflex thing, which we'll come to in just a minute. But for now, let's go refresh and see what it looks like. So I got nothing here. And there's a little drop down for not started, in progress, and complete, which is right. What is going on here? So I guess it's because they're nil by default. Let's actually go ahead and fix that. So I want to do, well, I suppose that it's actually already there. I mean, we could do a validates presence of, but that might be redundant. We'll look at that later. I'm just going to go ahead and add a validates presence of status. And so now in our checklist items controller, we'll actually need to go ahead and set this by default. So what we can do is just, you can pass it in through like a hidden field in the form, but I always find that is a little bit too passive in my opinion. I'd rather call it out at this level. So what we should do is say, instead of create here, let's do new. Let's do checklist item.status equals not started, and then checklist item.save. And now let's go back and let's delete our checklist items and create another one here. Just see where we are. So testing this out. So now we have not started here and a pretty decent looking drop down. So that's basically what we want. I want to kind of clean this up a little bit because that looks a little bit weird. Let's go over here and let's make that, it's already a btn SM. Maybe we can start by just giving it some margin on the right. Let me actually take away this float. I'm not entirely sure what that's doing there, so let's make that an MR3, 4, and see where we get. Okay, so we do indeed need it to float, probably. That'll probably work for the moment. I kind of want a would like this all to be vertically centered, but I'm not going to stress about it right this moment. Okay, so let's hook up our stimulus reflex action. Okay, so if we look back at, where were we? So down here we have this click action. So if you click on one of these drop-down items, we get this status reflex. Now what do we call ours? I think we called it checklist item. So in our reflexes directory, we have this checklist item reflex. So I'm going to go ahead and just remove all of this. And I'm going to create a method called change status. And let's go ahead. Do I have pry installed in this already? I don't. That's okay. I'm not going to worry about it. Let's just kind of try it. So what we can do is say checklist item reflex change status, and we're passing in the data ID and the data status that we want. So what we can do is say checklist item.find element.dataset.id. Let me double check that is the data ID and then the data status that we want. So we'll say checklist item equals, and then we'll just say checklist item.update status data element.dataset.status. Okay, so if this is hooked up, that should indeed work now. Just double checking on my spelling here. Okay, let's pop back over and try it. So we'll refresh, and that works. Cool. So you can see it's updating and the color's changing. If we refresh, it's still there. So that's cool. Okay, so what I want to do is actually hook this up with a progress bar. So I got this pulled up in another tab with Bootstrap over here, and so they have this default progress bar, and I want to play around with this. I've actually never really worked with it, so I wanted to kind of experiment, and I guess you will get to be a part of that as well. So let's go try this. So I think I want to stick it just above this unordered list, and let's get that lined up. I'm going to go ahead and give it an MB3 so it's got some space. And let's refresh on our app and see what it looks like. So it just kind of pops in there. So what I'm thinking is we want our color codes to match. So when it's in progress, I want it to be this color. When it's complete, I want it to be this color. And what I mean by that is I want there to essentially be up to 3 colors. So you should be able to see which percentage is complete, which percent is in progress, and which percent is not started. And I think not started, I kind of like this light gray default that they have actually. So maybe we'll stick with that for now. So what we need to find out is, can we get 2 color sections in here, and what does that look like? So let's try it. So I guess what I'm going to start by trying to do is copy this. I'll put the width at 10% maybe. And then let's add a different background color to 1. So we saw BG success, and then maybe BG info. So I'm just kind of guessing at how this works. That does indeed look like it's doing what we want. It's just kind of stacking them up. I do not like those colors together like that though, which is unfortunate. So I have to think about what to do there. Let's see what happens. Let's get the functionality working, and then we'll worry about the colors. You know, actually that's too hard to look at. Let me just fix it real quick. So I'm pretty excited. I think Bootstrap 5 is coming out with a much more extensive color library, which will be interesting. I think what I'm going to do, success probably needs to be green. Info, we probably should go with primary here. Let's see what that looks like. That should pop a little bit more. Yeah, I don't love it, but it's better. It's less hard on the eyes, so we can stick with that for now. I probably want to also keep the primary for in progress consistent. So let's fix that. So now that color matches that color. Okay, so we want those things to match. So this looks like it's doing what we want it to do. I am not clear on what all the various area value min, value now. I assume this needs to be 10 here. See what this looks like if that changes anything. Doesn't look like it. We'll just assume that needs to be the same as the percentage. I don't know what the value min and value max is all about. This is kind of how I work sometimes when I'm just exploring stuff, just kind of working through it. So what I want to do is, instead of having this be 25% here and then I guess the number 25 there, what I want to do is just say, I'm going to set two little variables here, and one's going to be percent completed. Let's just say complete. Percent complete equals, and then we'll say checklist percent complete, and then we'll say percent in progress equals checklist percent in progress, like that. And then I'm going to copy these variables and place them where I want them to go. So the complete should go first. And I'm going to stick with the number. I did not do something right. Okay, try that again. Let's just type it out. Percent complete. And there we go. So now I'm going to copy this same deal and go ahead and replace this value now thing. And we'll paste the other one in here in just a second. So we want the percent in progress, and now we need to define those methods. So if we go over to our checklist, so I'm going to create a couple of methods here, percent complete and percent in progress. So I'm going to put some hard-coded numbers in here for now and just go see what it looks like. 50. So we should have a little green bar and a bigger blue bar. So that's what I was hoping to see. Okay, cool. So let's see about getting this hooked up. So first of all, we need a denominator. So I'm going to write I guess it doesn't need to be private. Let's just write a method called total items. And this is just going to be checklist items dot count. And what we want to do is say, and we're going to call this multiple times, so I'm going to just kind of cache it in an instance variable. So I'm going to say at total items or equals checklist items dot count, so that we don't calculate that over and over again for the same object. And what I want to do is say checklist items dot complete dot count divided by total items. And we're writing code that doesn't, we're pretending some code exists that doesn't currently exist. So we're going to have to deal with that in just a second. Let's see here. What do we want to do? We want to multiply this by 100. And then we want to just round. Okay, and let's go ahead and copy this. And you know what I want to do, I don't think I want to put a, I don't want to define a scope for the moment. I think I'm just going to do like a map and complete like this, and then we'll do the same for in progress, and then we'll just need to define those methods. And so let's go over here to our checklist item. And so we'll just write a couple of methods here. Complete, and then we'll say status equals complete for true or false evaluation, and then in progress, same thing. So let's just check really quick, and I think over here, just glancing at this actually needs to be select. We don't want to map because that's just going to make If you just map, it's actually going to return, you know, true or false for each thing, and then put that in an array. So that's really not what we want. So we want to just select, and then let's go refresh. So we have basically just one that's in progress right now. So it should look like this actually, just a solid blue line. Let's go ahead and delete it and see what happens. So now we actually get divide by 0 error, which what we should do here is just say return 0 if total items is 0. And I'm going to put that on both of these, so we just have this little guard statement here. And let's refresh now, and we should just have this empty bar basically. Cool, so let's add a few things and see what we can do. So I'm just going to click on some stuff I've typed before. Okay, so now let's see what happens if we change this. Okay, so that's obviously not working, and it looks like I made a classic mistake. So right here, we need to convert one of these numbers to a floating point number, because when we count this, it's an integer. When we count this, it's an integer. So like 1 divided by 3 in integer math is going to return 0 all the time. So what we can do is just say .2f here. And let's go back and try that again. So now if we refresh, what's going on? Okay, I had a binding.pry in there earlier while I was testing, so it got me stuck. So now if we change any of this stuff, you'll see that this kind of just nicely slides along, which is kind of crazy because I didn't expect it to actually have the animations like that, but that's pretty cool. So just a couple of things I want to do really quick. So we don't really have green anywhere else in the app yet, and I know that complete is typically green, but I just think those colors right now are really not looking great. So I wonder if I could do something like, instead of success, if I could do just like dark. And then over in my checklist item, wherever that was, if we could change that to be, where is that? Color class dark. We'll probably change that later, but it's actually a little bit more easy to see anyway. So those buttons are less obvious, but that looks pretty cool though. That looks pretty cool. And then we can just complete our project like that. So I don't know, we'll work on the colors again later. Like I said before, I'm gonna have a session soon to just kind of really revamp the design. But now we can actually you know, work on our project here and complete stuff, or our checklist rather. So anyway, it's kind of cool. The idea here is for you to just have kind of a daily journal or daily whatever you're doing, you know, taking notes or whatever, and then you'll be able to have checklists and whatever. We'll eventually want to be able to drag and drop all of this stuff, as well as drag and drop items within a list. But I think that's pretty much it for this episode. This kind of dragged on a little bit longer than I thought. Not sure if you can tell, but I'm a little bit worn out today, so I've had a pretty intense project going on. So in any case, I'm not complaining. Hopefully this was helpful, and hopefully you enjoyed this episode. If you did, be sure to give me a thumbs up, leave a comment if you've got any questions or reactions or what have you, and be sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this. All of that said, I will talk to you in the next episode.